Why do most of us feel that pang of anxiety every time we check our bank account? Why do we feel that emptiness after every purchase that promised to fill us with happiness? The answer isn't in making more money, but in something much deeper and more powerful. The ancient Stoic philosophers discovered more than 2,000 years ago the secret we've forgotten in our desperate race toward material abundance. Today we're going to unearth that ancient wisdom that can transform not only our finances, but our complete relationship with life. Because true wealth isn't in what we have, but in what we don't need. We live deceived by the greatest of all modern illusions. We've been sold the idea that material abundance equals happiness, that accumulating objects is accumulating satisfaction. But we know this is a lie because we've lived it in our own flesh. We bought that phone that promised to revolutionize our life, and 3 months later, we were already wanting the next model. We've filled our closets with clothes we barely wear, our homes with gadgets that collect dust, our minds with the constant anxiety of wanting more and more. Consumer society has turned us into hamsters running on an infinite wheel. Every advertisement we see is a dart aimed directly at our deepest insecurities. They tell you that you need that new car to be respected, that brand of clothing be attractive, that tech device to be modern, and we, like sleepwalkers, open our wallets again and again, hoping this purchase will be different, that this time will truly bring us the peace we seek. But the Stoics understood something we're starting to rediscover. Marcus Aurelius wrote that true poverty doesn't consist in having little, but in desiring much. Epictetus taught us that wealth consists in not having needs, not in satisfying all the ones we have. Seneca demonstrated with his own life that one can be prosperous without being enslaved by prosperity. These wise men understood that uncontrolled desire is the root of all financial suffering. How many times have we justified an unnecessary purchase by telling ourselves we deserve it? How many times have we confused a whim with a real need? The problem isn't the object itself, but our unhealthy relationship with acquisition. We become addicted to the momentary pleasure of buying, ignoring the lasting pain of debt and financial anxiety. Most successful people who have achieved true financial freedom share a secret they rarely mention publicly. They didn't get there by making more money, but by mastering their impulses to spend it. They understood that every time we give in to an impulsive desire, we're surrendering a part of our personal power. Every unnecessary purchase is a vote of no confidence in our capacity for self-control. The ancient Stoics developed specific techniques to deal with these impulses. When they felt the desire to acquire something, they first asked themselves if they really needed it or if they just wanted it. They imagined themselves without that object and evaluated whether their life would really be less fulfilling. Most of the time, they discovered they could live perfectly well without that acquisition, and that the desire was just a temporary illusion. We can apply the same wisdom today. When you feel the impulse to buy something, stop for a moment. Breathe deeply and ask yourself if this purchase brings you closer to your real goals or takes you away from them. Ask yourself if in a year you'll even remember having wanted that object. Most of the time, the answer will surprise you. True luxury isn't in being able to buy what we want, but in not wanting to buy what we don't need. This is a fundamental distinction that separates those who have found financial peace from those who live in constant economic anxiety. The former have developed the inner strength necessary to say no to their impulses, while the latter are slaves to every desire that crosses their mind. But let's be honest, developing self-control isn't easy in a society that constantly bombards us with consumption messages. Every corner has a temptation. Every app on our phone suggests something new to buy. Every casual conversation seems to include references to products we should have. It's like trying to diet while living in a chocolate factory. However, this is where Stoic philosophy offers us concrete and powerful tools. It's not about depriving ourselves of all pleasure, but about consciously choosing when and how to experience that pleasure. It's about regaining control over our financial decisions instead of letting emotions and impulses make them for us. Imagine for a moment that you're the captain of your own financial ship. Every spending decision is like choosing a direction in the ocean. If you let the winds of impulse and the current of advertising direct your vessel, you'll end up lost at sea, without resources and without clear direction. But if you take the helm firmly in your hands and navigate with purpose and intention, you'll reach destinations you hadn't even imagined possible. Stoic self-control isn't repression, it's power. It's the difference between reacting and responding. When we react to a buying impulse, we're like robots programmed by external forces. When we respond consciously, we're full human beings exercising our most fundamental freedom, the freedom to choose. The Stoics practiced what they call the exercise of preference. Before making any decision, they asked themselves if that action made them a better version of themselves or a worse one. Applied to finances, this means asking ourselves if each expense brings us closer to the person we want to be or takes us away from them. Do we want to be disciplined and prosperous people or impulsive and indebted ones? True wealth, according to the Stoics, isn't measured by what we possess, but by what we can do without while still feeling our life has meaning. This revolutionary perspective completely changes our relationship with money and possessions. Instead of being compulsive collectors of objects, we become conscious curators of experiences and values. Many people who have achieved real financial independence will tell you that the turning point didn't come when they started earning more, but when they developed the capacity to need less. They discovered that most of their previous purchases had been desperate attempts to fill emotional voids that no material object can truly fill. Think about it this way. Every time you buy something unnecessary, you're not just spending money, you're trading your future time for a momentary present pleasure. Because that money you spend today is time you'll have to work tomorrow to recover it. It's future freedom you're sacrificing for instant satisfaction that will last barely days or weeks. The Stoic masters taught us that we are the absolute owners of our decisions and, therefore, the architect of our financial destiny. It's not external circumstances that determine our prosperity, but our internal responses to those circumstances. It's not the amount of money you earn that makes you rich, but the wisdom with which you handle every dollar that passes through your hands. When we develop true financial self-control, something magical begins to happen. The numbers in our bank account stop being a source of anxiety and become a reflection of our inner discipline. Every month we finish having spent less than we earned is a personal victory that transcends the purely economic. It's a demonstration that we're capable of postponing immediate gratification for long-term well-being. But Stoic self-control goes beyond simply saying no to impulse purchases. It's about developing a completely new mindset about what we really need to be happy. The Stoics discover that genuine happiness comes from internal sources, not external ones. It comes from a sense of purpose, from meaningful relationships, from personal growth, and from contributing to something greater than ourselves. This understanding frees us from the endless cycle of desiring and acquiring. When we know that our happiness doesn't depend on the things we possess, we can make financial decisions from a place of strength and clarity, not from emotional desperation. We can genuinely ask ourselves what we need to live a fulfilling life and discover that it's much less than we thought. The true owner of their impulses isn't the one who never feels desires, but the one who feels desires and consciously chooses which ones to satisfy and which ones to let pass. It's like being the doorkeeper of your own financial mind. Not every impulse has the right to enter and become an action. You have the power and responsibility to decide which ones deserve your attention and which ones should be politely rejected. Imagine that your self-control is like a muscle that strengthens with exercise. Every time you say no to an unnecessary purchase, you're doing repetition in the gym of your personal discipline. At first, it may feel difficult and unnatural, but with constant practice, it becomes not only easier, but deeply satisfying. There's a special joy in knowing you have mastery over your impulses instead of being mastered by them. The Stoics also understood that self-control isn't something achieved once and for all. It's a daily practice, constant vigilance over our thoughts and desires. Every day presents us with new opportunities to exercise our financial discipline or to give in to temptation. The difference between those who build lasting wealth and those who live in constant economic stress lies in consistency of these small daily decisions. But what happens when we face true financial crises? How does Stoic self-control help us when we lose our job, when an unexpected medical bill arrives, when the economy enters recession? This is where true Stoic wisdom demonstrates its power. Because the Stoics didn't just prepare mentally for prosperity, but developed specific strategies to navigate financial storms. The ancient masters practiced what they called the premeditation of evils, which wasn't morbid pessimism but intelligent preparation. They regularly imagined adverse scenarios not to anguish themselves, but to develop contingency plans and strengthen their mental resilience. In financial terms, this translates to constantly asking ourselves what would happen if our income was reduced or temporarily disappeared. This practice naturally leads us to one of the fundamental pillars of financial security, the emergency fund. But not just any emergency fund, but one built with a Stoic mindset. It's not simply about accumulating money out of fear of the future, but about creating a solid foundation of mental tranquility that allows us to make decisions from serenity, not from panic. Most people who achieve true financial stability will tell you that their emergency fund gave them something more valuable than economic security. It gave them psychological freedom. When you know you have resources to survive several months without income, you can negotiate from a position of strength. You can take calculated risks. You can say no to opportunities that don't align with your values. The Stoics understood that preparation isn't paranoia. It's practical wisdom. In a world where circumstances can change rapidly, having financial reserves isn't pessimism but intelligent realism. It's recognizing that although we can't control what happens to us, we can control how prepared we are to respond to what happens to us. But Stoic preparation goes beyond cash saved for emergencies. It also includes diversifying our income sources. The Stoics knew that depending on a single source of sustenance was risky, not because they were greedy, but because they understood the impermanent nature of all external circumstances. Today, this is more relevant than ever. We live in an economy where industries can transform overnight, where companies can disappear without warning, where skills that are valuable today may be obsolete tomorrow. Stoic preparation urges us to develop multiple competencies, multiple sources of value we can offer to the world. But let's be clear, we're not talking about living in constant paranoia or compulsively accumulating resources. The Stoics sought the virtuous middle point between irresponsible carelessness and paralyzing anxiety. It's about taking prudent measures while maintaining inner serenity, preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. The premeditation of evils also helps us develop gratitude for what we have now. When you imagine losing your job, your house, your health, you return to the present with renewed appreciation for blessings you might have taken for granted. This gratitude isn't just emotionally satisfying, but financially powerful, because grateful people tend to spend less on external pursuits of happiness. The Stoic masters also taught us that crises aren't interruptions of life. They're an integral part of human experience. Therefore, preparing for them isn't pessimism but maturity. It's recognizing that life includes both periods of abundance and periods of scarcity, and that our happiness and tranquility shouldn't depend on which of these periods we're currently in. When you have a solid plan for difficult times, something interesting happens with your relationship with money during good times. You stop feeling the desperate urgency to spend everything you have because you know that part of your resources are destined to protect your future. This security allows you to more consciously enjoy the expenses you do decide to make because you know they're not compromising your long-term stability. Stoic preparation also includes developing what we could call emotional financial resilience. It's the capacity to maintain calm and mental clarity when economic circumstances become challenging. Many people make the worst financial decisions of their lives precisely when they're under economic stress because they allow panic to cloud their judgment. The Stoics regularly practice mental exercises to strengthen their capacity to respond, not react to crises. They imagine losing everything and ask themselves how they could rebuild from zero. This wasn't mental masochism, but practical training to develop confidence in their ability to adapt and prosper regardless of circumstances. Think of it this way. If you know you can survive and eventually prosper even in the worst possible scenario, then any less extreme situation becomes manageable. This confidence allows you to make smarter financial decisions because you're not operating from fear, but from inner strength. Preparation also teaches us to distinguish between real problems and imaginary worries. Many of us live in constant anxiety about financial scenarios that never materialize, while we don't prepare adequately for real and probable risks. The Stoics encourage us to be specific and practical in our preparations, not vague and anxious in our worries. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of Stoic preparation is how it changes our perspective on what really matters in life. When you prepared mentally to lose all your material possessions, you begin to value more the things that can't be taken away: your character, your relationships, your skills, your capacity to find meaning and purpose even in the most difficult circumstances. This mental preparation naturally leads us to the next level of Stoic financial wisdom, completely redefining what it means to be rich. Because once you develop self-control over your spending impulses and created solid systems of preparation for crises, you realize that true wealth doesn't have much to do with the numbers in your bank account. We've been conditioned to measure wealth in completely the wrong way. We believe being rich means having millions in the bank, ostentatious houses, luxury cars, and the ability to buy anything we desire. But this definition keeps us in an endless race, always chasing the next financial goal, always feeling poor regardless of how much we have. The Stoics had a radically different perspective. For them, true wealth was freedom. The freedom to choose how to spend your time, the freedom to say no to opportunities that didn't align with your values, the freedom to not constantly worry about money. And they discovered something revolutionary. You can have this freedom with much less money than you think. Marcus Aurelius, who was literally the most powerful man in the known world at his time, wrote that true wealth consists in not having needs. Seneca, who accumulated considerable fortune, taught that the richest man is the one who needs least. Epictetus, who lived much of his life in poverty, demonstrated that inner wealth can exist independently of material circumstances. What does this mean for us today? It means we can redefine financial success not as the ability to buy everything we want, but as the tranquility of knowing we have everything we need. It's a shift in perspective that can completely transform our life experience. Imagine waking up every morning without financial anxiety, without worrying about incoming bills, without feeling that constant pressure to earn more and more money, without that sensation of always being one step behind in the economic race. This tranquility doesn't require being a millionaire. It requires having enough to cover your real needs plus a margin of safety and the wisdom to distinguish between real needs and manufactured desires. Most people who have found true financial peace will tell you that the decisive moment wasn't when they achieved a certain amount of money, but when they stopped constantly worrying about money. And this transition happens much earlier than we think, when we develop clarity about what we really need to be happy. The Stoics practiced a powerful exercise they call the exercise of sufficiency. They regularly asked themselves what was the minimum they needed to live a dignified and satisfactory life, not out of masochism or because they despised life's pleasures, but because they understood that financial anxiety comes mainly from not knowing when we have enough. When you don't have clarity about how much is enough, every amount of money feels insufficient. You can have 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, and still feel like you need more to be at peace. But when you've consciously defined what constitutes sufficiency for you, you can relax and enjoy once you reach that goal. This doesn't mean settling for mediocrity or stopping economic growth. It means having a clear reference point for financial tranquility, a place from which you can make wiser and less anxious decisions about money. When you know you already have enough to be well, any additional money becomes a bonus, not a desperate necessity. The true metric of wealth, according to the Stoics, is the ratio between what you have and what you need. If you need very little, then even modest amounts of money can make you feel abundant. If you need a lot, then even enormous amounts can leave you feeling poor. The key is working on both sides of the equation, increasing what you have when possible and appropriate, but more importantly, being very conscious and selective about what you really need. Think about the most financially tranquil people you know. They're probably not necessarily the ones who have the most money, but the ones who have found a sustainable balance between their income and expenses, and who have cultivated contentment with that balance. They've learned to distinguish between standard of living and quality of life, and have chosen to optimize the latter. The Stoic masters also taught us that true wealth includes elements that money can't buy. Free time, deep relationships, physical and mental health, sense of purpose, inner peace. A person who has a lot of money but lives in constant stress, who works 80 hours a week with no time for relationships or personal growth, who has sacrificed their health for material wealth, is that person really rich? This perspective leads us to a fundamental question. What is it we really want from money? Most of us don't want money for itself. We want what we think money can give us. Security, freedom, respect, the ability to care for our loved ones, the possibility to contribute to important causes. But many of these things can be achieved with less money than we imagine. if we're intelligent and conscious about how we seek and use it. The Stoics discover that there are two ways to be rich: have much or need little. And although the first option receives all the attention in our society, the second is more reliable, more sustainable, and more immediately achievable. You don't depend on external circumstances to need less, but you do depend on factors outside your control to have much. When you change your definition of wealth from having much to needing little, something magical happens. You stop feeling poor while working toward your financial goals. You can enjoy the process of economic growth without the desperation of someone who feels they never have enough. You can make better financial decisions because you're not operating from emotional scarcity. This new metric of wealth also frees you from the constant comparisons that do so much damage to our financial well-being. When your wealth is measured by your inner tranquility rather than your relative position on some external scale of material success, you stop feeling envious of those who appear to have more. You realize that many people with more material possessions than you are less at peace, less free, less rich in the aspects that really matter. The Stoic masters also understood that true wealth has to do with time. Time is the only truly non-renewable resource we have. A rich person is one who has control over their time, who can choose how to spend their days, who isn't trapped in jobs they hate just to maintain a lifestyle that doesn't bring them real happiness. This leads us to one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves. How much money do I really need to have freedom over my time? The answer will vary for each person according to their circumstances and values, but it's probably less than you think if you're honest about what you really need versus what you've been conditioned to want. Many people who have achieved real financial independence will tell you that the magic number wasn't as high as they initially imagined, but they'll also tell you that developing the mental clarity to know what that number was, and the discipline to work toward it without getting dispersed in unnecessary expenses, was much more challenging than they expected. Stoic wealth also includes the ability to enjoy what you have instead of always being focused on what you lack. Gratitude isn't just a nice spiritual practice. It's a powerful financial tool. People grateful for what they have need to buy less external happiness. They can find satisfaction in simple pleasures and experiences that don't require large expenses. But let's be practical. We're not suggesting that everyone should live in forest cabins renouncing all material pleasures. The Stoics weren't extreme ascetics. Seneca lived in luxury, but wasn't addicted to luxury. Marcus Aurelius enjoyed the benefits of his position, but didn't define his personal worth by them. The key is having a healthy and conscious relationship with material possessions, not avoiding them completely. True Stoic wealth is having enough money to not constantly worry about money, but not so much that money becomes your main preoccupation. It's having enough to be generous with others, to invest in experiences that enrich your life, to have options and flexibility, but not so much that you spend all your time managing wealth instead of living life. This balanced perspective on wealth frees us from both the anxiety of scarcity and the anxiety of excessive abundance. Yes, there are people who suffer from having too much money, who become prisoners of their own riches, who lose the ability to enjoy simple pleasures, who live with constant paranoia about losing what they have or about the motivations of people who approach them. The Stoics taught us that true financial freedom isn't being able to buy anything, but not needing to buy many things to be happy. It's a subtle but revolutionary distinction. It completely changes how we approach our finances, our careers, our life decisions. When you understand that real wealth is freedom and tranquility, you can make different choices. You can choose jobs that satisfy you more even if they pay less, because you know you need less to be prosperous. You can take more creative and entrepreneurial risks because your definition of financial failure is much lower. You can be more generous with others because you're not operating from emotional scarcity. This new metric of wealth also allows you to enjoy more of the money you do spend. When each purchase isn't a desperate attempt to fill an emotional void, but a conscious choice aligned with your real values, the act of spending money becomes more satisfying and less compulsive. You buy fewer things, but enjoy more the ones you do buy. The Stoic masters also practice what we could call anticipatory wealth. They regularly imagined that they already had everything they needed to be happy and discovered it was true. This wasn't self-deception but recognition of a profound truth. Most of us already have the basic elements for a satisfying life, but we're so focused on what we lack that we can't appreciate what we have. Do this mental exercise right now. Imagine you have to live with exactly the resources you have now for the rest of your life. No salary increases, no inheritances, no lotteries. Just what you have today. Could you be happy? If the answer is no, what is really missing? Are they legitimate basic needs or socially conditioned desires? Most of us discover that we could be much happier with what we already have if we develop the wisdom to fully appreciate it. This doesn't mean stopping working toward financial goals, but enjoying the journey instead of living in constant postponement of satisfaction until we reach some magic number in the future. The Stoics understood that true wealth is as much a mental state as a material condition. You can feel rich or poor regardless of your objective financial situation, and that subjective perception profoundly affects your quality of life and your future decisions. When you feel rich with what you have, you make decisions from abundance, not from scarcity. You're more generous, more creative, more willing to take intelligent risks. When you feel poor regardless of how much you have, you make defensive decisions. You accumulate compulsively. You live with constant anxiety. The difference isn't necessarily in the numbers, but in the perspective. This understanding leads us to the final, and perhaps most transformative aspect of Stoic financial wisdom, the power of gratitude as an economic practice. The Stoics didn't see gratitude as an occasional feeling, but as a daily discipline that completely transformed their relationship with material. When you practice genuine gratitude for what you already have, something fundamental changes in your brain. You stop operating from the scarcity mentality that drives most bad financial decisions. You start seeing opportunities where before you only saw limitations. You develop real contentment, which is the foundation of all sustainable prosperity. Gratitude also helps you distinguish between real needs and desires manufactured by marketing. When you deeply appreciate what you already possess, it's much harder for them to convince you that you need the latest version, the improved model, the premium upgrade. Not because you're stingy, but because you've developed real discernment about what adds value to your life. The Stoic masters regularly practice what they call the exercise of imaginary loss. They imagine losing everything they had, not to torture themselves, but to return to the present with renewed appreciation for their current blessings. This practice has an immediate and powerful effect on financial satisfaction. Imagine for a moment that tomorrow you lose everything you have. Your house, your job, your savings, all your material possessions. Now imagine that by some miracle you could recover exactly what you have today. Wouldn't you feel incredibly fortunate? Wouldn't you experience intense joy for having exactly what you now might take for granted? This isn't just abstract philosophy. It's a practical tool for developing what modern psychologists call reverse hedonic adaptation. Instead of getting used to our blessings until they become invisible, we can train our mind to see them with fresh eyes regularly. When you develop real gratitude for what you have, the compulsive impulse to acquire more is naturally reduced. It doesn't completely disappear, because it's human to want to grow and improve, but it loses that desperate quality that leads to self-destructive financial decisions. You can want things without needing them emotionally, which is a crucial distinction. The Stoics also understood that genuine gratitude isn't passivity or conformism. It's active recognition of the value of what you have, which allows you to build on that solid foundation instead of always starting from emotional zero. It's the difference between building a house on solid rock and building on quicksand. But let's be specific about how to apply this wisdom in our daily life. Stoic financial gratitude includes appreciating not only what you have, but what you don't have to face. If you have work, you can be grateful not only for the income, but for not having to face the anxiety of unemployment. If you have health, you can appreciate not only feeling good, but not having to deal with catastrophic medical expenses. This expanded perspective of gratitude helps you value your current stability without waiting for some crisis to make you realize how fortunate you were. It's proactive gratitude, not reactive. It's preventive wisdom that protects you against the chronic dissatisfaction that drives both impulse spending and financial anxiety. The Stoic masters also practice gratitude for their capacities and opportunities, not just for their possessions. They were grateful for their ability to generate income, for the opportunities available in their society, for the skills they had developed over the years. This gratitude to potential, not just for current results, generates genuine confidence and optimism about the financial future. When you're genuinely grateful for your capacity to generate value in the world, anxiety about money diminishes because you know you can always create more value if necessary. You're not depending solely on what you already have, but trusting in your continued capacity to contribute and prosper. This confidence based on gratitude for your own capacities is completely different from arrogance or presumption. It's humble but realistic recognition that you have valuable internal resources that no external circumstance can take away. It's a form of wealth that is truly yours, independent of financial markets or economic conditions. The Stoics also extended their gratitude to the people and institutions that made their prosperity possible. They were grateful for their teachers, for the laws that protected property, for the exchange systems that allowed commerce, for previous generations that had built the infrastructure they benefited from. This expanded gratitude connected them with something greater than themselves and reduced the tendency toward extreme individualism that can generate financial anxiety. When you recognize how much of your prosperity depends on factors beyond your individual control, you develop both humility and confidence. Humility because you understand you're not completely self-sufficient, and confidence because you see that you're part of systems and communities that have demonstrated their capacity to generate prosperity over time. This perspective also makes you more generous, which, paradoxically, improves your long-term financial health. Generous people tend to build better relationship networks, create more opportunities for collaboration, and develop the abundance mentality that's essential for sustainable economic growth. The Stoic masters understood that extreme stinginess, although it may accumulate money in the short term, impoverishes life in ways that eventually also affect material prosperity. When you live with extreme scarcity mentality, you lose opportunities for investment in relationships, in your own development, in experiences that could generate future value. The Stoic balance between gratitude and ambition, between contentment and growth, between generosity and prudence, is perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of their financial wisdom. It's not about choosing one extreme, but about consciously navigating between apparently contradictory polarities. You can be completely satisfied with what you have and simultaneously work toward more ambitious financial goals. You can be generous with others and careful with your resources. You can appreciate material pleasures and not be addicted to them. The key is maintaining consciousness and intention instead of being dragged by automatic impulses. This consciousness allows you to make every financial decision from a place of clarity and purpose, not from emotional reactions. When you buy something, you do it because it adds real value to your life, not because you're trying to fill an emotional void. When you save money, you do it for future freedom, not from neurotic fear. When you invest, you do it for intelligent growth, not from impulsive greed. The Stoics taught us that true wealth isn't measured in moments of abundance, but in moments of scarcity. It's not how you behave financially when everything goes well, but how you respond when things get difficult. Gratitude practiced during good times becomes resilience during challenging times. When you've developed genuine appreciation for the basics, financial crises become less emotionally devastating. You can lose money without losing your inner peace. You can face cutbacks without feeling your identity is threatened. You can adapt to reduce circumstances without bitterness because you maintain perspective on what really matters. This emotional resilience allows you to make better decisions during crises, which is when financial decisions matter most. People who maintain calm during economic storms are the ones who find opportunities where others only see disasters, who buy when others sell in panic, who invest in their future when others are paralyzed by fear. In the end, all this Stoic wisdom about money comes down to a simple but profound principle. Money is a tool, not a goal. It's a means to live well, not the definition of living well. When you maintain this clear perspective, all your financial decisions become smarter because they're aligned with your deepest values instead of with superficial fears or impulses. The ancient masters left us an invaluable gift, the understanding that we can be prosperous and tranquil, ambitious and satisfied, careful with money and generous with life. We don't have to choose between material prosperity and emotional well-being. We can have both, but only if we apply wisdom to our relationship with the material. We have explored today the foundations of that wisdom. The self-control that frees us from compulsive consumerism, the preparation that gives us security without paranoia, the redefinition of wealth that allows us to feel prosperous before being millionaires, and the gratitude that transforms our daily experience of abundance or scarcity. These aren't abstract ideas to contemplate in philosophical moments. They're practical tools to apply immediately in our lives. Every time you feel the impulse to buy something unnecessary, you can remember the Stoic teachings on self-control. Every time you worry about the financial future, you can apply their techniques of mental and practical preparation. Every time you feel poor despite having sufficient resources, you can redefine your metric of wealth. Every time financial anxiety threatens to overwhelm you, you can resort to gratitude as an anchor of stability. The transformation these ideas can create in your life isn't gradual, it's immediate. From the moment you start applying these principles, your relationship with money begins to change. Chronic anxiety about finances starts to dissolve. Financial decisions become clearer and less stressful. You start feeling that deep tranquility that comes from knowing your control over what really matters. Your responses, your choices, your inner peace. This is the invitation we extend to you today. Join us in this search for financial wisdom that transcends the numbers in bank accounts and reaches the heart of what it means to live well. Be part of a community of people who value tranquility over luxury, freedom over ostentation, wisdom over materialism. Because at the end of the day, the Stoics were right. The richest life isn't the one that has more things, but the one that needs fewer things to be complete.
Remember, practicing Stoicism is a daily journey toward inner peace and resilience. If this video has inspired you to reflect or helped you see things from a different perspective, I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. Which idea resonated with you the most? How do you apply Stoic discipline in your life? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any content. Together, we will continue exploring the wisdom of the great Stoics and discovering how to apply it to our modern lives. Thank you for being part of this community. See you in the next video. Keep cultivating strength with every step and share your journey with us.